attended tomorrow.
Peter Beck from Birmingham Green Party, and also representing the party in the local Stop the War coalition. Further to what's being said, my impression, you went to the same meeting, Vina, is that Stop the War, it might not be the case with National Stop the War, but you can tell me, I'm sure. Their approach is that essentially you can forget any regional agreement or United Nations or anybody else being involved once you agree to, withdraw. You just leave it to the Afghanis to sort themselves out. That's their business, and there's no further, if you like, interference or help from any other outside source. So, is that the case? I mean, it makes a difference in terms of our participation with Stop the War if we're saying slightly different things. We're not going for regional agreements and so on to end it all.
I mean, I don't think we have a position that goes down to that level of detail. I mean, what we do say is that, part of what you said, definitely that, the solution has to come from the Afghanistan, from the Afghani people, or it won't be a lasting solution, and it won't be one that really represents their interests. But I don't think that necessarily precludes assistance from the United Nations or the possibility of regional agreements. So, I mean, it's something that obviously different people within the coalition have lots of different opinions on, like the one in the motion and like the one
there isn't a national standpoint, that's what I'm trying to get.
Well, yeah, I don't think we have one.
I would say that when all the publicity, I mean, I didn't come back on this earlier because, but all of the publicity from National Stop the War has talked about a regional peace conference. So there is an understanding that there will have to be some involvement of surrounding countries, but they don't go into a lot of details. And one of the main reasons why we brought this motion is because, I mean, in 2006 the Green Party put through a very hurried motion which called for withdrawal from a number of countries, including Iraq, Afghanistan was mentioned, so that it's already party policy. But there was no flesh on the bones. There were no policy details whatsoever, and we thought that, there was a need to bring this up to date and actually think about some of the details, because it's very easy to say we should just go, but I think there needs to be some thinking about what would happen.
Well, I can remember when the Russians withdrew in the 1980s, one of the things they found, of course, the warlords immediately were warring amongst themselves. So isn't it better, if they may look terrible, but just to leave and that's it? Because I think trying to solve tribal things that are going on is extremely difficult, and perhaps the surrounding neighbours know far better than what we do, the actual thinking behind it. Because basically I don't think the Russians had a clue then, we certainly haven't got a clue now. This is my feeling about it.
I'll just take one more question and then I'll allow people to come back. Is there a question to it?
No, I wish to make a short contribution later, thank you.
Hi, Mark Sloboda. I'm a dual citizen of Russia and the United States. I'm a military veteran and postgrad at LSE. I was wondering if you could comment on the ethnic divisions in Afghanistan, particularly the Pashtun, the Tajik, and the Uzbek, and how this played out in the recent election, quote unquote, especially with the recall of the Uzbek commander from Turkey, and what this ethnic interplay with the elections would entail for any future government of the Afghan people, as you talked about.
Okay. Is it better to leave them to it? In principle, we'd say yes. But in reality, there's been so much interference that if we just suddenly packed up, it could be a Somali situation. If you ask me the question, do you want NATO to carry on fighting there for, as the British General says, 40 years, or do we leave? I'd say leave. but it would be better to leave in a way which we don't have to support another country to go and attack again, whether it's Pakistan or the Saudis. So I would say let's agree on withdrawal and then talk about the process, but let's at least start the dialogue with the countries that are in the region and say, how do we want to do this? Because if we just, it's not going to happen that we're suddenly going to leave today. In fact, whatever we talk about today, the next 12 to 18 months is going to be a continued war. We're going to be sitting back here in 2011, and then probably after the US congressional elections and whatever happens then, there'll be withdrawal. So my heart says yes, withdraw, but once they've created the mess, at least talk to people and say, not how we can solve it ourselves, but how can we allow other people to solve it. Regarding ethnic divisions, I have some notes on elections here I can talk after, I have to look through, I'll talk to you after the meeting about the elections that have happened and the split between the Pashtuns and the Tajiks. But I don't know the population of the Tajiks, but there are about 13 million Pashtuns there, of which Hamid Karzai is a very minor leader. I'll talk to you after the meeting.
Okay, since we're coming near the end, I'll just ask you for your contribution to.
Thank you. First of all, it's very good to see a packed meeting on the subject of Afghanistan, very successful fringe meeting, and the regret that we must feel for the clash with the Palestine Solidarity Campaign meeting has been expressed. It's such a pity that we have to be divided from them in what is an equal area of world concern, particularly for anti-war campaigners. Farid, do you mind if I just disagree quickly? I agree so much with what you and the Stop the War speaker have said. I'm with the general gist, but I will be here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to argue that all nations have a right to self-determination, that invaders have no right to predicate corrupt, monstrously corrupt governments like that of Mohammed Karzai upon an oppressed people, and that our only decent, the only decent political campaign point must be that the invaders, all of them, must get out as soon as possible, and we must act in solidarity with oppressed people across the world in that way, because the United Nations force, even if it came from neighbouring countries in terms of its personnel, would, through the United Nations and the dominance of American imperialism and its satellites, like Britain, for example, the puppet government in Britain, would ensure that the United Nations, were it to govern or attempt to govern Afghanistan, would fall into exactly the same pit that NATO is in, that is, of an invading, oppressive and murderous external force, and that therefore our demand for withdrawal should be unqualified, and the motion that we wish to discuss at the conference tomorrow, in my opinion, should be amended accordingly. Thank you for listening.
Just a point of information, James, the motion doesn't mention the United Nations.
Oh, sorry. Brilliant. Just a complete withdrawal. Sorry, I'm wrong about that. Great stuff. I thought that.
Well, very quickly.
The motion does mention that. Continued support from EU, UN and other international bodies.
Continued support for the process, not actual UN intervention.
Well, mentions the UN.
I mean, there are people who believe there should be, you know, the current NATO troops should be replaced by UN troops. That's why we didn't put that in the motion. Okay, I'd like to thank everyone very much for coming along, and especially Tom for standing in at last minute notice, and Farid. Thank you very much.